Mason, and this is Cara, and we are the hosts of Expert Secrets Revealed, Conversations in Health and Fitness, also known as the ESR Show, sponsored by Centrax Nutrition. It's a show built around exceptional people, ideas, and concepts that educate, entertain, and inspire. And we're really excited to have today's guest on, which is Roger Crawford. And he's an outstanding individual. And some of the things I think are really cool about him is Sports Illustrated magazine calls him one of the most accomplished physically challenged athletes in the world. He's written books that have been translated into 17 different languages. His most recent book is called Think Again, Discover the Possibilities Hidden in Plain Sight. And there's a list of major media outlets that he's been featured in, including CNBC, Good Morning America, The Today Show, Monday Night Football, USA Today, Wall Street Journal, and Men's Fitness. So very, very, very excited to have Roger on. Roger, thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Roger. Mason, Car, thank you for having me. Been looking forward to this.
Absolutely. Now, for those who are not familiar with you, you have a rare genetic defect. Tell us about that and tell us how you found opportunity in adversity.
Right. So, Cara, I was born with a physical challenge. It affects all four of my limbs, from the elbows down and from the knees down. I think the best way of describing my physical challenge came from my daughter, Alexa. When she was younger, she invited me to speak at her school. And I told her, I said, honey, are you concerned that the other kids, they're going to know about your daddy's hands? Are you comfortable with that? And she looked at me and said, Daddy, you were born to be an inspirational speaker. Aww. You have peace sign in one hand, a thumbs up on the other. So that's how I look at it. I have three toes on my right foot and a partially developed lower right leg. My left leg was amputated when I was 5 years old. So today I wear an artificial leg or prosthesis. But your question about how did I view adversity growing up, which I think is a good one, I was very fortunate because I had parents that taught me at a very young age that everybody's challenged in some way. Some challenges you can see, like mine, but there's other challenges that you can't see. So that philosophy really helped me not feel sorry for myself, feel that, my life really wasn't that much different than someone else's life. So I think that was an important life philosophy, life view, if you will, to have as I was growing up. Now, I'm not here to say that there weren't some tough times. I mean, there were moments I just so desperately wished I had normal hands and normal legs. But, all of us feel that way at some point. Maybe it's not about your hands, your legs, but, we all go through periods of time where we wished, I wish this was different or that was different about my life.
Absolutely. What was it in the point of your life? I mean, what was that point that, you decided that you weren't going to let this get you down and you were going to fight, for what you wanted and what you wanted to do no matter what? Did you have a turning point?
I can't really say that it was a specific turning point. I think it was more of a process, but it was, first of all, finding my giftedness. Look, I'm a lousy piano player, obviously. I tried riding a motorcycle, couldn't apply the brakes, right? So obviously there were some limitations. But I think it was identifying my giftedness. I come from an athletic family, so I was oriented towards sports at a young age. But I think the message for everyone listening is I think it's important to separate what you can do from what you cannot do. I'm not saying that you shouldn't work on your weaknesses. Of course, you want to try to make them better. But if you inherently are not gifted and you work as hard as you can in that area, maybe you'll have average results. But if you find your giftedness, if you're in tune with that, you work as hard as you can at refining it, making that giftedness better, then you get up to that superior level, that level of excellence. So the process in my life really, I don't think is much different than anyone's life. All of us have to get in touch with what we do well and then celebrate what we do well and make it the best that we can be to become the best version of ourselves. I've tried to be like someone else. I've tried to be like everyone. I got normal hands, but they were cosmetic. They were very cumbersome. And I remember when I was wearing them, in many ways, I felt like I was wearing a mask. Here's the reason. You can change your outward circumstances, but it doesn't automatically change your mindset.
Yes.
Circumstances can change, but mindset ultimately is a choice. I wasn't able to choose my hands or my legs. For the people listening, there's a lot in your life that's out of your control and you can't change. But you can control your mindset, the quality and the content of your thoughts.
When you talk about mindset, obviously you've developed inner strength. Do you have any tips or strategies that you could share with others that they might find helpful?
Well, that's a good question, Mason, about inner strength. So let's talk about that for a moment. Where does inner strength come from? I think first and foremost, it comes from looking back on your life and seeing evidence of your courage and your resiliency and your ability to bounce back. Because this often happens to me, and I bet for the listeners, this has happened to you as well. And Mason and Cara, I bet you've seen this happen in your life, that when you're filled with self-doubt and you're really discouraged and you lack inner strength and you stop for a moment and you look back on your past, you realize that you're forgetting what you probably should remember and you're remembering what you probably should forget. See, what happens is, I believe, that when people's inner strength is diminished, they're reliving past hurts and past disappointments, and then rehearsing future failure. So I think it's important that we step back for a moment and we look at our past and we identify those moments that we can draw inspiration from. I think number two, it's getting the facts. You see, it's so easy, isn't it, that when we're in turmoil, when we're facing adversity, we overestimate our obstacles and we underestimate ourselves. That's why I think it's important to get the facts. And finally, it's take it one moment at a time. Now, we've all heard the old saying, live one day at a time. But when we're working our way through challenges, we can't do it all at once. We just have to do it incrementally. When I was younger, I learned this from a gentleman named Terry Fox. A lot of people.
Terry Fox, growing up, he was the one who ran across the Canada, wasn't it? With I think he had prosthetic leg or something like it. Ran all the way across Canada. I remember.
You have a great memory. And I'm glad, Mason, that you remembered his story, because I found it incredibly powerful. So for the people that aren't familiar with his story, he lost his leg to cancer. And now keep in mind, this was many, many years ago when prosthetics were much more primitive than they are today. I mean, now the technology is incredible, but back then they were most likely made out of wood. Okay, I mean, it was really primitive. So he made a decision that he was going to run across Canada to raise money for cancer research. Now, here's the important part of the story. It's on one leg every day. He's going to run the equivalent of a marathon. Amazing. But, and here, when we're talking here about really one moment, one day at a time, they asked Terry Fox, how did you do it? And here's what he said: one telephone pole at a time. That's a real powerful message for all of us, right?
It is.
Because we can look at these obstacles we're facing and they just seem, the enormity of it, right? Takes our breath away. But then if we start to chip away at it, little by little, one telephone pole at a time.
Right. Now, you talk about fear and anxiety, which I think comes into play with a lot of this. Can you tell me what you think the difference is between those two? A lot of people put them together, but you say there's a difference between those two.
Yes, Cara. So let's take a look at fear for a moment. Fear, by definition, is a reasonable and understandable response to our circumstances. So let's say, for example, we're going to take a risk. We're going to leave the known, enter into the unknown. It's reasonable and understandable that you're going to face a little bit of fear. So in many ways, I think fear is something that we can embrace. Now, here's one of the key differences between fear and anxiety. Fear is present based. It's in the moment. Like I always say to people, I have the fear of public speaking. It's absolutely true. When I walk up on the stage, my heart's beating. I mean, my mouth goes dry. I start to perspire a little bit, right?
Sure.
But, and also, fear is based upon something real. Anxiety. Here's the definition: the negative use of mental rehearsal. It's anticipating a negative outcome, whether it occurs or not. It's not evidence-based, by the way. It's created right up here. So anxiety is not present focused. It's future focused. It's seeing that doom and gloom ahead of us. Now, here's why it's important, I think, to differentiate the two, because oftentimes people say, gosh, I'm a little bit nervous. Does that mean that I'm going to fail? Does that mean that I'm not performing at my best? And I always say to people, no. No, it's reasonable. It's understandable to have a little bit of fear. What I think you have to guard against is that negative use of mental rehearsal. It's that what if, right? I'll never forget, I was talking with a gentleman who was going to give a presentation. And he said, and it was like 2 weeks out, and he says, I'm just absolutely can't sleep. And I said, well, tell me why. And he said, I'm afraid I'm going to get sick in front of the audience. I said, have you ever gotten sick in front of the audience? He said, no. I said, have you ever heard of anybody getting sick in front of the audience? He said, no. So he started to break it down a little bit, and he realized that all of those concerns, right, were not based on something real. They were imagined.
That's a
So
very good point.
it's separating those two. And I hope that's good, because I think one of the biggest differences, present-based versus future-focused. And also it's that negative loop that we get into, right? And here's why we do it oftentimes. We do it as somewhat self-protection. Because if we develop enough anxiety about taking a risk or reaching a little higher, then we'll end up not trying. And if we don't try, then we don't have to risk failure. You know, I used to coach tennis. I used to tell my players, I mean, nobody hits a winning shot sitting on the bench, right? Wherever there's a risk, there's always an opportunity, right? So anxiety, oftentimes we use it to protect ourselves because we don't want to fail. But see, I think that, specifically talking about tennis, from my experiences, I think we either win or we learn. It's our choice, right? We can win, but if we don't win, we can learn.
Yes.
So it's not a waste, right? It's positive because we've gained some insight, some inspiration. We understand that we have capabilities that maybe we didn't have before, and it feeds our resiliency. It's something we can put into our mental file cabinet.
You talk about resilience. You know, there's that old saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Yeah. You know, and it's been my experience and the people I've been around, that, you know, grit and mental toughness is key. And when you talk about someone like Terry Fox, or, you know, someone who's had life challenges that you've had, can you tell me a little bit about how to dig deep? You know, any secrets you have about digging deep and utilizing that grit in a positive way?
Great question. I think, first of all, our grit is developed by having a clear purpose, knowing exactly where you're going, knowing what you want to accomplish. Because when you can establish that clarity, then we don't let our disappointments get in the way of our desire. So it's being crystal clear on where we want to go, because that fuels our determination. Oftentimes our resiliency is weakened when where we want to go or what we want to accomplish is unclear. So I think first of all, it's having clarity. Number two, don't try to be perfect. Try to be consistent.
Okay.
When I was playing tennis, Mason, I wasn't the fastest and I wasn't the most powerful, but I was able to play tennis in high school, and then I went and played on it in college. Now, I wasn't the best collegiate tennis player in the world, but I think, you know, I really did become a pretty good version of myself, and I think I unlocked some potential along the way. But what I learned was If you can hit the ball over the net one more time than the other person, you win the point. I think that's central to resiliency.
Okay.
You're not going to be perfect. There's going to be times you're going to get knocked off track, that, you're going to feel discouraged, but it's getting back and being consistent, because we can always be consistent in our mindset. Not perfect, but consistent. We can be consistent in our efforts. That's not too much to ask, just to be consistent, right? Not perfect, but consistent. It's interesting. I find that when people take that pressure off of being perfect, it's amazing how their performance increases,
Agreed.
because they understand that it's attainable. You can be consistent.
One of the questions I had for you is related to adversity. I mean, there's also that old saying that necessity is the mother of invention. Well, what causes necessity? Adversity. And I thought you might have a unique outlook on
Absolutely.
adversity. And I was wondering if you might share that with us.
Sure. Well, we've all had some adversity lately with COVID.
Yes.
Yes.
It's interesting. They call it the novel coronavirus. And the reason they use the word novel is it's new, it's different, it's never been seen before. And while that's true, challenges are not new and change is not new. So I think as far as adversity goes, it's part of life. It's part of our human experience. And accepting that, I think, is important. Now, how do we view adversity? Well, I think first of all, adversity provides us an opportunity for growth that we might not have had otherwise. Now, I'm not suggesting that we should love every adversity we face. I mean, because sometimes it's tough, it's difficult. We got to dig down deep and get through it. But if we can view it through the lens of, what can this teach me? How can I get better from this experience? How can I take this experience and turn it into opportunity? Cara and Mason, you both know people that have gone through tremendous challenges, and when they come out the other end, new possibilities are before them, new opportunities. So I think looking at it as an opportunity for growth, accepting it, because when we accept what we cannot change, I mean, it's sort of like with me. Cara, was thinking about that question, which was a very good one. Was there a turning point? And my answer was no, not specifically, but I will tell you one mindset that I adopted that really transformed my life pretty quickly was accepting what I could not change. I'm not going to be able to change my hands or my legs. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because when you talk to people about this, they think that, if I just accept it, that's weakness. But haven't you found this, that when you accept what you cannot change, it unlocks strength and focus to change what you can?
Now, when you talk about change, people face obstacles to that change. And I'm wondering if you have any tips or suggestions that, based on your life experience, that could help people overcome obstacles that are getting in the way of that, in some case, much needed change.
We've all learned, I think, from COVID. I certainly have, as someone who makes his living out speaking to live audiences. When that came to a halt quickly, unexpectedly, because of COVID, I had to change pretty quickly. And what I learned was, and you know this in your life as well, and I think everybody listening has had this experience, it's a lot easier to change before you have to.
Good point.
And I think that it's having a forward to normal mindset. That's what I call it. When we expect change, we can more easily accept change. We erode our resilience when we say things like, "Boy, I'll be a lot more positive when things get back to normal."
Yeah, right.
That's true.
because we're not going back to normal. We're not. Normal's going to be ahead of us. It's not behind us. So we can resist it, we can ignore it, but the truth is we're going to have to respond to change or we're going to be forced to change. That's the reality. But we talked about fear versus anxiety. Now here's what's interesting. When people walk through change and they have a little bit of fear, they view change as something new. Okay. So fear, looking at change, something new. But when you have an anxiety, you look at it, something's wrong. What am I going to lose? What's going to be the cost? And what's interesting about that is it's anticipating all that negative outcome, but everyone knows that with change comes new possibilities. I mean, look at our world now, how different it is because of COVID. And look at the people that have had that positive mindset, been looking for opportunities. It's amazing what's happened.
Sure. Well, in our world of health and fitness and wellness, a lot of times, change is very necessary for people who may have for whatever reason, and sometimes the thing getting in the way of much needed change is excuses. I know that you've got a little bit of experience in helping people eliminate excuses, and I was wondering if you might be able to offer any tips or insights that might be helpful to people in our audience.
Yes, help us.
Sure. Well, I think all of us know this, that if we decrease excuses, we're going to increase results. Just makes sense, because what are excuses? Well, again, it gets back to what we talked about earlier. It's self-protection in many ways, because we can point to something outside of us, right? And this is the reason, or that's the reason. But what happens is that it weakens you. It weakens your resolve. It weakens your resilience, because it's pointing to something that is not within your control or influence. It's the economy, it's other people, it's my boss, it's my spouse, whatever. So the important distinction, I think, that we need to make is this: is the obstacle that we're facing, this excuse, if you will, is it out there or is it in here?
Fair enough.
And when we start to see that maybe the excuse is in here, then I think we need to start looking at, what is the motivation for the excuse? What's the motivation? Is it anxiety? Is it because you don't want to fail? You don't want to be disappointed? Because you're worried about the risk? And I would say this: if you take a risk and you fail, is that a more difficult experience than not trying at all? I heard a great quote the other day, and this is not my quote, this is from someone who was speaking. They said, we talk about return on investment. He said, and we calculate that. What's the possible return on investment? And the speaker said, what is the return on inaction?
Wow.
Nice.
Right?
Yes.
What's the cost? Because what I've found, and I think all of us, when we look at it through that lens, we realize that the cost of not trying is much greater than trying something and falling flat on your face. I just believe that. I know for me, I failed a lot. And I can tell you that all those experiences, there's been value. There's been value in each one of them. I'm not saying we should try to fail, don't get me wrong. But what I am saying is, if you're going to be a risk taker, if you're going to seize those opportunities in life, you're going to unlock your potential. I can't guarantee that you're going to succeed, but I can guarantee you this: you're going to face failure. It's
Absolutely.
inevitable.
Absolutely.
It's going to happen.
Yes.
And I think we need to be okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
I got one last really quick question because I know we're almost out of time. But
Sure.
if there was one piece of advice that you could give to people based on your life experience, what is the most important piece of advice that you have to offer to people that are watching today? If there's one piece of advice that you could give to anybody watching today, what would that piece of advice be?
I would say to people that challenges in life are inevitable, but defeat is optional.
Excellent.
No matter who you are, you've got greatness within you to be the best version of yourself. And I think embracing that challenges are going to happen, setbacks are going to happen. And the only way that you're going to be defeated is if you quit, if you give up. That's what I would say.
Thank you, Roger. Thanks so much for being with us today. We
Oh,
really
you're
appreciate
welcome.
it.
I
How
loved
can
it.
people?
Thank you.
Great. How can people get a hold of you? I don't want to leave until we let people know how they can get a hold
Sure.
of you or bring you on into their, maybe talk to their team, or
Acquire where they can get your books, any
Yeah.
or all those things.
everything.
Sure. So they can go on my website, which is rogercrawford.com. That's ROGER, rogercrawford.com. And they can contact me through my website. They can get my books or talk to me about speaking to their group or whatever, in any way that I can serve them. This has been the greatest privilege of my life to hopefully inspire and uplift people. And
Well,
so
you
if
did
there's
us today.
Yes, you did.
Thank you. That's
been a-
very nice.
been
Well,
a
I love
pleasure.
being here. And I appreciate the invitation very much. Okay.
Absolutely. Have a good one. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And
Bye-bye.
thank you, everyone, for watching. You can find this podcast and others on esrshow.com, and you can subscribe to our YouTube channel there as well. And we also want to thank our sponsor, Syntrax Nutrition. You can find them at syntrax.com. Thanks so much, and we'll see you again soon.